Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as it's pretty cold at the moment with an Arctic air mass over the top of us, but it will be turning milder by around Tuesday, Wednesday time with southwesties returning. And we thought perhaps towards the end of the week we could see a bit of a stormier spell, and there still is the potential for that. Been downgraded a little bit by the UKV today, looking more at sort of 40 or 50 mile per hour wind gusts instead of 70 or 80. So we'll have to see what happens later in the week, but regardless of how intense any of these low pressure systems will be, there will be rain around and there will be gusty, blustery winds. As we head into the longer range though, as we see on the GFS, GM, ECMWF and the ensembles, we have been looking at the possibility of seeing some blocking returning to our north. It's started to crop up in the models in the last couple of days, and we are seeing some really quite bizarre runs from some of the models today. The GFS, in fact, produces a bitterly cold northerly wind, even gets the -10 isotherm in for some areas of the north come early April. Now, of course, it's very difficult to get anything severely cold in April, as it is really quite late in the year, or at least late in the spring. But this sort of conditions could give quite dangerous overnight frosts, especially for plants and crops, and it could give wintry showers in places where really just delay the onset of proper spring into summer. So hopefully we don't see something like that, but it's cropping up on the GFS and the GM and ECMWF. Don't go for anything too severe, but do have big blocking patterns and have the potential for much colder spells, whether it is just chillier easterly winds or whether it is quite a potent northerly wind. We will have to see, but definitely looks like there is potential into April of seeing some sort of polar plunge or big northerly wind. So, do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So do start on the live radar. You can see it is pretty decent out there at the moment. A few wintry showers down the east coast in this colder air mass, but most areas are pretty dry. You can see across the near continent unsettled conditions mixing with that cold air. We can see some snow over quite a bit of the Alps, and to low-lying areas in places, a bit of a wintry mix. But for the UK, it's generally cool, if not quite cold, feel out there, but plenty of sunshine. One of the driest days we've had in a good week or two at least, and it's all because of the cold, drier Arctic air mass. Now, towards the southwest, we will see rain approaching from around this evening onwards, and into tomorrow, most areas will see rain at some point in the day. Hopefully, further eastwards, it's more towards the afternoon or evening, but it will unfortunately push away this cold air and give us milder, wetter conditions again. But you can see the temperatures are generally average to slightly below average, a lot of blues and lighter blues appearing, which are mid to low single digits, and some yellower colours approaching, which is sort of 8 or 9 degrees. So nothing too crazy, but nothing too cold, really, just generally average to slightly below average for the time of year. And of course, with that northerly wind, there will be a bit of a wind chill, but again, maybe a couple of degrees below what the actual temperature is. So feel like temperatures widely probably in the mid-single digits. Pretty cold for the end of March into early April, but in the grand schemes of what we can see normally in winter, it is not particularly that bad. If we do go to the UKV now, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. You can see dry day today, really quite nice, and that rain is approaching from this evening onwards into tomorrow. Approaching western areas in the morning, and eastern areas actually probably going to see it around lunchtime. So afternoon, mid-afternoon is going to be a bit of a stretch. Maybe the far northeast of Scotland, but most areas seeing that rain progress through. Maybe even seeing a bit of brightening up towards the evening in the far west before we do see showers pushing in. Overnight, nothing too crazy before we see the bands of heavy, potentially thundery rain pushing for Wednesday, and that does continue likely into Thursday with more pop-up thundery showers, and then into Friday. This is where we think we could see a little bit of a stormy system. A little less organised here, but you can see the little eye of this low-pressure system, and we've got big bands of precipitation spiralling in. We did see 70 or 80 mile per hour gusts on its southern edge yesterday, but it's looking likely today from the UKV. It's going to be quite a severe low, a lot of rain around, looking really quite unsettled through Friday, but the biggest impact probably will be this rain and the wind. If we have a look at the wind gusts, more likely to be towards that 40, 50, maybe 60 mile per hour gusts towards the coast instead of that sort of smaller area of 70 or 80 miles per hour we saw yesterday. So it is touch and go. Perhaps we will see a yellow warning issued for this, and if it does upgrade, maybe an amber warning or named storm, but I wouldn't expect anything too crazy at this stage, as it is simply too early to tell, as it is sort of the 4 or 5 day time frame. If we do have a look at the upper air temperatures, you can see how cold air is in at the moment, and it does get pushed away through the middle of the week. Much milder conditions do push in, and you can see really quite warm air actually approaches towards the end of the week at times, and that does fuel the low pressure system before cooler air could come back in towards the weekend and start of April. Now if you look at the max temperatures, you can see that this afternoon maybe 8 to 10 degrees, maybe a nice hit at 11 being the max, so average to slightly below average. Overnight tonight we'll see a frost in northern, perhaps eastern areas where we still see some clearer skies, all dependent on the cloud amounts, and that can change at very short notice. We'll have to see what happens with that. And then into Tuesday afternoon, again you can see those temperatures are cool still, 7 to 10 degrees, so not rising all too much from today. So even though upper air temperatures do rise, because of the rain, cloud and trapped cooler air towards the surface, it will still be a relatively cold day tomorrow. Across the Republic of Ireland, you can see the air mass we're going into 15 degrees or so, quite widely there. So pretty mild air moving back in, but we'll have to see what happens with that. Beyond that, into Wednesday, we do see afternoon temperatures, once again 12 or 13 degrees, nothing too bad, more around average for the time of year, and that same into Thursday could actually rise to 16 or 70 degrees. Yes, accompanied by some thundery showers, but when we do avoid those, it'll be quite warm out there, pretty pleasant, above average conditions, perhaps there. However, into Friday, with that very unsettled conditions, it probably won't be all too mild, more around that sort of 10 to 12 degree mark, and then we'll be turning cooler into the weekend with that colder air mass pushing in. Now, if you have a look at the GFS and see what that is showing over the course of the next couple of weeks, it has thrown some real quite interesting runs out recently. It does look likely now we will see some sort of blocking into early April. Unsure though exactly what it will produce. Now you can see the southwesterly winds coming over the coming days, that low pressure system getting carried by the jet stream that could become a little severe low pressure system. But from this run, it's quite a deep low pressure system, but nothing too special. However, as we head into the weekend, we start to see blocking appearing up towards Iceland and Scandinavia. We do see an easterly wind in for the first full week of April, but it moves up towards Greenland, and look what happens. A northerly wind, a pretty bitterly cold northerly wind coming in from around the 5th to 7th of April. Proper Arctic northerly here. Again, this occurring 2 months ago, and we'd be in the absolute freezer. -10 to -15 isotherm would be coming in, but coming in early April. -5 line looking likely for all, maybe the -10 in the far north. Beyond that, we stay in that colder air mass, and we eventually do see southwesterlies moving in, and that will be milder as we are on the milder side of the block. But if this was shoved a little bit further westwards, we still got this block in place, and we could be seeing easterly winds with that. If you run it back and have a look at the upper air temperatures, you'll be able to see it's not amazingly cold, but it's all in the greens and the -5 area, all well below average, all pretty chilly and pretty cold, and could even produce some snow and winteriness in the north. So you can see the easterly winds moving in, -5 isotherm pushing in, so pretty cold, maybe even the -10 getting in there for a time. So we don't expect anything especially cold with that, but pretty chilly, well below average temperatures in the mid to high single digits probably, maybe touching 10 degrees in the far south and west, furthest away from the easterly flow. And there could be a few wintry showers around, but probably the surface temperatures might be a little bit too mild for that. However, beyond that, you can see this big northerly wind coming in. The -10 isotherm comes in for the north. The south, -5 isotherm moves in, and it goes bitterly cold before eventually southwesterlies do come back in. But I must emphasise the block is still there. We are still arrowed in for a northeasterly wind. We're just on the wrong side of the jet stream at this stage. Could subtly shift to give slightly different conditions. If you go back and look at the potential equivalent temperatures, look at that purples coming in. It just shows you how bitterly cold that air mass is. Again, if we have a look at the temperature deviation, look at that, between 8 and maybe even 10 degrees below average for the time of year. Bitterly cold air mass, just in general spectrum, not even for early April. So this sort of air mass in January we'd be very, very cold, let alone into early April, when we're expecting temperatures should be in the low to mid-teens perhaps. So yeah, this would be really quite bitterly cold. Again, if we look at the dew points, go to United Kingdom, well below freezing dew points for all 2 metre temperatures overnight. Look at that, widely below freezing, and in the day, maybe touching 6 or 7 in the south, over higher ground in the north with some precipitation, maybe some winteriness, really only touching mid to low single digits. So really quite cold from the GFS today. Not, or highly likely that it won't come off, but there is the possibility there, and definitely does look like blocking will come out on top from the latest, from what we're seeing in the latest run, so we'll have to see. If we look at the GEM now, you can see the southwesterly winds moving in. We do see that blocking building to our north. Nothing too substantial as of yet, but it does attempt at easterly winds, and you can see a bit more of blocking pattern towards Greenland. So on this run, it does go sort of in between. Not particularly warm air mass, not particularly cold air mass, generally around average for the time of year, but quite stagnant flows. This probably, even though the overall pattern is still blocking, it might not actually be all too bad at the surface. Probably a little bit chilly if we did see a bit more of an easterly in there, which is a slight change in this orientation. But with this sort of air mass over the upper, higher pressure, we could squeeze out some warm days but cold nights under this higher pressure. So we'll have to see how the GM does evolve, but it has a similar sort of blocking evolution, but doesn't get it quite far as north and doesn't connect that sort of Greenland high to the mid-Atlantic ridge that we see building in to bring in that northerly wind. You can see the cold air is poised to our north, just doesn't fully come in as we don't get that northerly going. But we will have to see, of course. If we look at the ECMWF, we do see southwesterlies coming in over the coming days. Eventually that pressure rises to our north. We do see a bit of easterly wind there, and right towards day 10 we see sort of a bizarre pattern where we do see us on the wrong side of the block, and we actually do go mild here. Now again, it's difficult to say exactly what would happen with this, but you can see a high pressure blocking to our north, easterly winds across the North Atlantic, but across the UK side, so more towards the mid-Atlantic, we see more southwesterlies. Again, similar to the GEM run, for the actual outcome for the UK, it's not too bad. It's actually average, probably maybe even slightly above average, but this probably would be very unsettled, whereas the GEM would be probably drier. But I must emphasise, this subtly shifts that pressure, rises slightly somewhere else, slightly further southwards or eastwards. All of this cold air would be shoved towards the UK instead of the North Atlantic, and we would go to a similar pattern to the GFS. So yes, even though the GM and the ECWF don't produce anything too cold, it's on the same overall spectrum as the GFS. So that is why I do think a cooler evolution is probably the more likely if we do get that blocking going. Now we can see this well emphasised by looking at the ensembles. You can see well below average at the moment, spiking above average, and that's why we can potentially see 15-16 degrees this week. And then into the first week of April, we do trend generally a few degrees below average. You can see the GFS operation run there, the thicker green line, definitely on the lower end of the ensembles. It's one of the lowest runs, if not the lowest runs at times, but there are plenty of runs that go well below zero, towards that -5 region. Of course, this is London, this is the far south. Anywhere further northwards could be as much as 5 degrees colder, because those air masses do degrade so quickly as they progress southwards. So the 1981-2010 mean is a little bit jumbled for some reason. It's been like that on West Central recently. But if we do extrapolate where it should be, we are well below average for a good week there towards the start of April. It does turn dry, which is one positive, but we'll have to see whether that will just be convection precipitation and no frontal rainfall, or whether it truly will be dry. If we look at the dew points, all trending back towards freezing. Again, uncertain exactly how cold it will get, but definitely not looking like a southwesterly air mass or westerly air mass by any means. Anything below 5 degrees this time of year is more of a continental or northerly airflow. And if we do finish by just looking at the ECMWF ensembles to compare that and see what that is showing over the course of the next couple of weeks, again, you can see a similar evolution. Cold at the moment, turning milder, and then trending below average for the first week of April, back perhaps towards average, towards sort of the 6th or 7th. So definitely looking potentially quite likely of a cooler or colder spell for a time here. But we will have to see how it does evolve. The GFS is definitely on the more extreme range, but I wouldn't count it out as of yet, as these sort of northerly winds in mid-spring or early spring. It's a bit late now coming into April, but generally in sort of March and early April are quite likely, and especially when we see a sudden stratospheric warming. These sort of patterns do generally come off quite often in early to mid-spring, simply because the polar vortex does degrade, it does die away, and that allows blocking patterns to evolve, especially with an early season SSW this year. It means those blocking patterns are even more likely, and it allows that cold air to spill out into the mid-latitudes. We saw cold northerly plunges back in 2021, some really quite cold plunges at the end of March, I think right at the start of April, like the 1st or 2nd. We saw some really colder plunges where didn't see any snow or anything like that, but saw quite a few wintry showers, hail, growlpool, sleet, maybe a few flakes of snow over higher ground, quite a wild, cold feel, and that's the sort of pattern we could see with this. So not expecting anything bitterly cold. It's way too late in spring for that, but definitely could put a delay to anything warmer or drier and keep us relatively cold for the next couple of weeks. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.